You can now predict the comedy guest acting categories in the Gold Derby Prediction Center. And the top 6 for Best Guest Actress in a Comedy Series are Maya Rudolph for The Good Place, Phoebe Waller-Bridge for SNL, Wanda Sykes for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Judith Light and Bette Midler for The Politician, and Minnie Driver for the final season of Will and Grace. So I am joined by Charlie Bright and Luca Giliberti. And Luca, why don't you start us off with something to say about that category?
Well, I don't want to be too boring, but I do have 5 of the 6 actresses that our odds are predicting. I do not have Minnie Driver in for the final season of Will and Grace. Will and Grace did get in Molly Shannon 2 years ago, but I feel like Will and Grace's revival, or whatever you want to call it, was not as well received as we thought it would be with the Emmys. But considering that this field is very wide open, I could definitely see it happening. I feel like the guest categories have become how many Saturday Night Live actors can get in. I think we all agree, obviously, on Phoebe Waller-Bridge, and there are many others in contention. Who I just have in my 6th spot right now is Scarlett Johansson. It's just sort of because of her 2 Oscar nominations and because of the momentum she's had. I don't feel confident in that prediction. I feel like a lot of people can get into that slot. I feel quite sort of confident in the other 5. I feel like something that will work in Judith Light and Bette Midler's favor is that the 2nd season of The Politician will air or will be released in 2 weeks, which is right before Emmy voting sort of starts. And they will be the leads in that season. So I think that will give them the perfect push. And I think they are pretty comfortably in.
It's so strange though, because I don't think anybody's really predicting The Politician anywhere else, but we're predicting 2 nominations in this one category. I don't know. I feel like that doesn't really happen at the Emmys.
That's true.
It just lacks an internal logic. But yeah, I do have both of them in. I feel like the 6th slot here is just wide open. I mean, I don't have Minnie Driver because she wasn't nominated for this revival already, and they snubbed Molly Shannon last year. I feel like Will and Grace is a show that the Academy has really moved on from at this point. Similar to how The Big Bang Theory last year had its final season. And I thought, okay, well, maybe this is when they want to bring, Bob Newhart or Metcalf or Christine Baranski or whoever was in that final season back into the mix because they had been nominated recently, and they didn't because it was just too late. So that's how I feel about Will and Grace. I don't necessarily have a good alternative to suggest. I have Kristen Wiig just because she has been nominated, so many times for SNL in supporting and a guest actress that I feel like people, even if they didn't necessarily see or enjoy her hosting this time, they still have a favorable opinion of Kristen Wiig next to SNL overall. Charlie, how do you feel?
Is Kristen Wiig eligible for an episode that she hosted?
She hosted the at-home finale, but I should note that all of the SNL submissions are unconfirmed right now. We don't actually know if they're only going to be entering people from the main season. We also don't know if they're going to be entering impressions by recurring players like Maya Rudolph and Rachel Dratch. And we also don't know if they're going to submit any guest actresses at all, because there was that one year where they just decided to submit none of them.
Yeah, so I mean, I have Phoebe Waller-Bridge winning in the top spot right now, just as sort of a placeholder, because to me the fact that it's Saturday Night Live and she's Phoebe Waller-Bridge, should just that alone should just it should just make her the top choice. I do have Maya Rudolph and Wanda Sykes getting in there. I do not have the other 3 in our top 6 in there. I don't have Judith Light or Bette Midler for The Politician. I just think that I think the reception to that show has been so underwhelming that that even with names like Judith Light and Bette Midler, I kind of find it hard to see them breaking in there. Although I think the fact that this category is so wide open is something that both works in their favor but also against them. And I can't figure out which one it works more towards. I can't figure out which direction that swing towards. And right now I'm of the mindset that it works more against them. I do have another Saturday Night Live actress getting in, but it's not Kristen Wiig, it's Jennifer Lopez. I just think that it's just one of those things that I think will just happen, and it's maybe one that a lot of people aren't necessarily keeping their eye on. I do have Molly Shannon getting in for Will and Grace, and to me, this says more about love for Molly Shannon than it does for Will and Grace, because I think that there is a lot of love for her, and if she's on that ballot, that's definitely going to be something that people will like, because they really do. She's having this really interesting point in her career right now, where she has all this prestige buzz, and I think that's something that's definitely going to work in her favor. And then I also have Angela Bassett for a Black Lady sketch show getting in, because Angela Bassett is someone who can, we saw when she got nominated for Master of None. That was I think it was a single episode, guest starring point. And I think Angela Bassett is just one of those types of actors who, whenever you just see her, you cannot take your eyes off her. And I think that's going to play very well in this category.
Yeah, I think even though we've said that this category is very wide open, if you look at the people who are in contention, there are so many different possibilities as to who could get in. I mean, Jane Lynch will not be eligible for the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and Guest this year because she's contending and supporting, but she will be eligible for Space Force, for instance, which just dropped on Friday, to be exact. So she's someone who's been nominated so many times at the Emmys. If they're just going on name alone, they might just check her off. We have Allison Janney for the Kaminsky Method. Allison Janney is another Emmy favorite who could just easily get in. We have Wanda Sykes for Blackish, who's been nominated for that role before. We also have Lisa Kudrow for The Good Place, which is a show that we all have Maya Rudolph obviously in. And since this is the final season, maybe it'll get in a few more actors. I feel like there's so many different possibilities here. It's just very difficult to figure out who's going to get in.
I actually think one of the other things that's also interesting here is, it really hasn't done well. It's actually, in recent years, it's actually done better in the guest acting races. Is Curb Your Enthusiasm has actually done pretty well in guest acting races in recent years. We've seen people like Lin-Manuel Miranda and Bryan Cranston get nominated. And when you look at some of those episodes and the characters that people are playing, someone like a Jane Krakowski feels like someone. Her episode is really funny, and she has.
What did she get to do, Charlie? Is that something you want to say on air?
No. But it's funny, I'll tell you that. It was a really, really, really funny guest turn that she did on there. And let's not forget also Michael J. Fox got nominated, for playing himself on that, where he took making fun of a neurological illness to new levels. But then you also have someone like Isla Fisher who has this great thing as a professional fake crier. Even if Curb Your Enthusiasm doesn't do well in other categories, these guest acting categories really do provide a very, very, very good chance for them.
Yeah, I mean, I just find it difficult because I'm not sure which one of them stands out the way that John Hamm does on the actor side. Mm-hmm. But hopefully, they just get a bunch of them in, and they actually don't choose between them. But yeah, I just find with this category, I find it easier to make arguments against pretty much everyone than for people. Jane Lynch, she won last year, so theoretically she should be nominated again. She's in the first few episodes of Space Force, which a lot of people are checking out right now. But at the same time, she is just sitting in that room, and that's the only place that we ever see her. Like, can you get nominated for a seated performance? Like, you can, but it's not something.
Ellen Burstyn did. She was sitting that entire 15 seconds.
Yeah, I guess someone else I would throw in is, again, Phoebe Waller-Bridge, but not for Saturday Night Live, but for Run, which is a show she executive produces. It just finished airing, I believe, a week ago, so it might be a top of mind for Emmy voters. I feel like toward the end of the season, the show lost a lot of buzz. I feel like at the beginning, it looked like it could be a very strong contender in these races, but I don't know if she'll be able to get in twice, because I feel like she's pretty safe for Saturday Night Live, and I don't remember the last time someone was nominated twice in the same category.
Well, that's the thing, is that like Maya Rudolph, I think, is a great contender for SNL, where she's recurring with her impression there. And we know she's getting nominated for The Good Place, and I think Wanda Sykes is winning, and then she also has been nominated several times for Blackish. But it's really hard to get nominated against yourself. In fact, it's something that has never been done.
Well, not in the acting categories, but is it allowed to be done in the acting categories?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So it is allowed, because this isn't one of the main acting categories, but we did see this in the
narrator.
The voiceover category. Seth MacFarlane got nominated against himself one year.
Yeah, and then we've had Leo Schreiber be nominated in narrator. But in the guest acting categories, for up until the last 10 years, you were only allowed to submit once per category. So then in the last 10 years, now we've had all these possibilities, and it still hasn't happened. The one that really got me was when Tina Fey had been nominated for Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, and then she couldn't get nominated the next year, but she was nominated for her, shared nomination with Amy Poehler. I just thought that was the perfect opportunity, and so I'm trying to be conservative with predicting people who I'm already predicting. Phoebe Waller-Bridge, she's somebody who I also thought would have a strong chance at being the first, but I don't know about Run currently. You mentioned Allison Janney, but she does just pop up in the finale playing herself. The lighting's weird, so it actually doesn't look like she's actually there. Who else do we have here?
We have Laverne Cox for Dear White People. She's obviously an Emmy favorite as well. She's gotten in for Orange is the New Black several times, but Dear White People isn't something that's been on Emmy voters' radar recently, but sometimes we just see shows randomly pop up in these guest categories. If it's any categories where random shows pop up, then it'll be here. But again, that's just someone I think we should look out for, but it's not someone I'll necessarily predict.
I think the biggest thing against her, especially when it comes to a show like Dear White People, is usually for that random nomination to happen, it usually has to be someone who's like Emmy royalty. And I usually will think of someone like when Laurie Metcalf got nominated for Horace and Pete, but that was also the year that she had 2 additional nominations as well. But the fact that she was able to get in for Horace and Pete, which I don't think got in anywhere else, except maybe a tech category or 2, and I don't think Laverne Cox is at that level in terms of her track record at the Emmys. She's got a couple of nominations, but I don't think that's necessarily the pedigree that you would see. That her being able to break in for that nomination.
Yeah,
I feel like it's kind of why I don't have Angela Bassett for Black Lady sketch shows. It reminds me last year when there was Kate Blanchett when she was not eligible for a documentary Now. I just feel like that show is kind of so far off their radar. But yeah, we'll see.
What do you guys think about Dead to Me? Because I think we should probably mention is that although we know of some contenders who are obviously competing in these guest categories, there's still the possibility that many others will self-submit, which we wouldn't know at this stage yet. For instance, Dead to Me, both Frances Carmore and Kate Sagal are not being submitted from what we've heard, but I feel like they are 2 people that could easily just self-submit because both of them are in more than one episode. They don't, or I believe Kate Sagal, is she in 2 or is she only in 1?
She's in at least a couple. Yeah.
Yeah, I think they are 2 people who could definitely self-submit. They don't have all that much to do, but they're still big names. And I feel like
Frances Conroy and Katie Sagal.
yes.
Well, I mean, if they haven't done it for Katie Sagal yet, I don't know why they do it now. That's the thing, you know. I'm so jaded after they snubbed her for Sons of Anarchy after she won the Golden Globe, because she deserved to get nominated, and I'm still like jaded after that. So I'm just like, they're not going to do it then. Why would they do it now?
It's very bizarre because yeah, as I say, even though they don't have that much screen time, I just feel like it's a typical guest performance you would submit here. And I feel like Dead to Me is on the rise now since its 2nd season again dropped the beginning of May. Just that I feel like it has much more momentum leading into its 2nd season than it had for its 1st season last year when it sort of came out of nowhere. I think it would be a missed opportunity, but we'll have to wait and see what happens.
Yeah, speaking of like continual snubs, I would love to predict Lisa Kudrow for The Good Place, since the penultimate episode is titled Patty, and she plays Patty, and she's also in Space Force right now, and she's been in so many things in recent years, but I just feel like she so rarely gets nominated that I can't bring myself to predict her now. And then speaking of self-submissions or not knowing all the submissions, like Catherine Keener is not on Amazon's list for Modern Love, but she's the lead of the 2nd episode, which is the most acclaimed episode. So if she submits herself, then I think, I'll predict her. And similarly, Kristen Milioti, she's the lead of the 1st episode, which is another very acclaimed episode from that show. And they're submitting her in supporting. So I'm supposed to be interviewing her soon. So if I can get her to drop down to guest, then I think I'll predict her.
I feel like Modern Love is one of those shows where just one of its actors will randomly pop up in one of these 2 categories. I wouldn't be able to put my finger on who exactly, but I think that's the show that could definitely pop up in either here or a guest actor. It would just be. Yeah, exactly. I think that can absolutely happen, where it just surprises and gets in this one person. I mean, we were talking about that earlier on, where if a show isn't necessarily getting into any other comedy series category and just randomly pops up here, maybe Modern Love is that show.
They're pushing Tina Fey for guest actress.
Makes sense.
All right, so over in comedy guest actor, I feel like that category is kind of the opposite of this one, where I can make strong cases for too many people. So then I have to figure out who to eliminate. So the odds have Eddie Murphy for SNL, and as well as John Mulaney. And then for The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, we have Luke Kirby and Zachary Levi. We have John Hamm for Curb Your Enthusiasm. And then Fred Willard is actually in 6th and 7th place in our prediction center for Space Force and Modern Family. And I find that really tricky because I want to predict Fred Willard too. We saw Carrie Fisher recently get a posthumous nomination for a role that they had passed over previously. But I just don't know which one to choose, because Space Force is the new show, and I feel like normally that's what they're more likely to go for. But Space Force also has been very poorly reviewed, and his work on Modern Family is more of a showcase, and then he gets to die.
Yeah, it is a very tricky situation, because we talked about this in Guest Actress just now. There is actually no excuse why someone shouldn't get in twice, because voters don't have to choose between one of the 2 performances. They can just check off as many people as they want. They would just have to be willing to check someone off twice. And I wonder if this really is the rare case. I currently don't have him in as much as I would like to predict him, and he really does have, a great sort of ending on Modern Family. But for me, this is sort of the Marvelous Mrs. Maisel and Saturday Night Live category. I don't only have 2 actors for Marvelous Mrs. Maisel, and I have in 3, and I still have in Jason Alexander, just because I feel like this show is going to blow up in the acting nominations once again. It won SAG over Fleabag, which had just won the Emmy and was the most buzzed about comedy last year, probably. the show won 4 acting Emmys last year, even though it didn't win comedy series, including this category for Luke Kirby. So I just feel like with this comedy series field and so many contenders not being eligible this year, I feel like they might just check off everyone from that show. And that's why I have 3 people from it in at the moment, which may not come to fruition, but I feel like that's the safest choice at this moment.
Yeah, I have I'm trying to think here. I have 2 people from SNL.
Yeah.
No, I have 3 people from SNL. I have Eddie Murphy, John Mulaney, and I put in RuPaul as well. I only have 1 from Maisel. I only have Luke Kirby coming back. I don't have Zachary Levi making it into the race. I really I don't have John Hamm in the race, although I very much might have to do some rearranging to put him in there. I actually feel pretty confident about Fred Willard getting nominated for Modern Family, since the reviews for Space Force have been so negative. I think that makes this actually easier to just, say, yeah, we want to go with this. And then I also have Leslie Jordan from Will and Grace. I think he's someone who has used, and I think this actually, part of this actually comes from how he's used social media during this whole pandemic. He's used his Instagram feed, and a lot of people just love looking at the videos on his feed, and he brings smiles to people's faces when God knows we desperately need them. And I think that sort of attitude, and hell, he's not only been nominated in this category, he won this category back in 2006. So I think he's someone who, if people just see his name and a smile comes to their face, that could be enough.
Yes. And again, we have 5,000 people from Saturday Night Live and who could make it in. We have Larry David, we have Tom Hanks, we have so many different people from that show. And I feel like every year it's the same guessing game where you just sort of have to pick and choose who you think will get in. But we saw last year, the show got, I think, 4 nominations in this category. So who knows, it might just get in many of its actors again this year, especially since the field is not as competitive as it was last year. And then we have random names, but Emmy darlings pop up, like Bradley Whitford for Brooklyn Nine-Nine. But I think many of us predicted
Brooklyn Nine-Nine.
Yeah, exactly. But I feel like many of us last year predicted Lin-Manuel Miranda for Brooklyn Nine-Nine because Sterling K. Brown got in the year before. And then he didn't get in. So I wonder if we do have to be careful with, these big Emmy darlings popping up in these shows and then predict them right away when we probably should be looking at the shows that mostly get in here, like Saturday Night Live and The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel.
And I think there's another show that I think has the potential to be big this year, and that's Schitt's Creek. And if there are enough people that really love that show, Dustin Milligan seems like he's ripe for getting a nomination here. It's his, and you think of the one episode, because in this one they do specifically submit by episode for the nomination part. The one episode that he's in, or maybe I think he's only in the one episode. I think it's called The Presidential Suite. That one is such a great episode for him. And it's one that had, people really buzzing about right after it aired. It was one of those things where I was trying to, keep it down on social media because I waited a day before I watched it. But then, someone wrote something that kind of basically gave it away. But it was still a really emotional performance, and I think he could very well get in. And even if he gets in, he could very well win.
And also,
probably be predicting him. I don't have Victor Garber just because I feel like people who are voting for Schitt's Creek this year are going to be looking at the show more as a whole, and maybe have not even seen the 6th season since it's not on American Netflix at the time. But yeah, there are a lot of possibilities in this category. I'll mention Deb Patel for Modern Love and Fred Armisen for Curb Your Enthusiasm. I thought that was a good guest part. The floodgates I thought were kind of open last year with that Robert De Niro nomination for SNL, where he was doing the recurring impression. And this year, I think we could see something similar with Brad Pitt, even though he only appeared the one time. But it is just that kind of thing where, you know, does seeing like Brad Pitt as Dr. Fauci, does that bring like a smile to people's faces and being like, oh yeah, that's fun, check it off.
And like it's a performance that makes you laugh, unlike De Niro last year.
I thought Larry David as Bernie Sanders just because, like De Niro last year, he was recurring throughout the season. But, you know, it's also a performance that they've nominated before, and they're also taking care of him in lead. So I'm not sure if they'll feel the need to do that in this category. SNL is also tricky because I feel like it's not as hot as it was a couple of years ago, but then it did get the 4 nominations in this category last year. So,
yeah. And I guess,
what
go
about
ahead, Charlie?
I was thinking, did Adam Driver get nominated last year for SNL?
No.
Okay, he didn't. Okay, I thought he had, but and he had some good material that last time around. This time around, it didn't feel like it was as much there. So I was going to say that's a bit of a drop off, but it doesn't seem like it matters now.
Yeah, I guess someone else I'll just mention is Dylan McDermott, who was contending for The Politician. If we mentioned the 2 actresses on the guest actress side, maybe we should just mention him here. He's also in Hollywood, for which he will be contending in limited series TV movie supporting actor. His role is very small in this, and I don't think he'll get nominated, but maybe The Politician does better than we expect, and he just surprisingly pops up here.
He's kind of due for a nomination. I think it's been like 20 years.
Yes.
Yeah. No. Okay. Well, it's just us now. What about Will Ferrell for SNL? I feel like he keeps popping up on that show, giving these acclaimed hosting performances, and he doesn't get nominated. But I feel like people are much more inclined to vote for him than some of the actresses that we discussed for this category, or the guest actress category.
Yeah, I think it's definitely a possibility. As I mentioned earlier, I think it's always a guessing game with the Saturday Night Live actors. I feel like all of them stand somewhat of a chance, but it's very difficult to predict who will get in. At the moment, I honestly just feel confident in Eddie Murphy and John Mulaney, and after that, it's everyone's guess. But he could just surprise, as we've seen in past years. Sometimes people just surprisingly get in for Saturday Night Live. The show absolutely dominates these guest categories.